for today's lesson, Kevin and I are going to try to build something together and not kill each other, at least on screen. So I am out here in our main vegetable garden. You can see behind me, these are 30-meter rows. There's our house behind. This was a big, basically what we called the football field. It wasn't the size of a football field, but just an open grass area behind our house that we are converting into our main vegetable and fruit garden. And I'm out here today to talk to you about the principles of no-dig. And no matter what you call it, no-dig, no-till, regenerative, the Ruth Stout method, Charles Dowding, whatever, the principles that you're using are pretty much the same. So here is one of our very long beds. We have here a layer of, this is compost from the barn, and then we have put it on top of cardboard. It's actually quite far down here, but you can see here there's a layer of cardboard, and then just what was underneath was just the grass. So we haven't really done anything, no digging, nothing, just cardboard, compost, and then I will top dress this. I can't remember what I'm planting here, to be totally honest, probably with a bit of more rotted down compost, like garden center soil, and that will be ready to plant. So there's a few principles of soil health. First up, you should always keep your soil covered. Now that covering could be with mulches, it could be with plants, it could be with a tarp. But what happens is when soil is exposed to the air, all of the good stuff, all of the carbon in the water and the bacteria and the seeds, all of those things are exposed to the air to do a couple of different things. So there's a lot of moisture loss, the bacteria can die, the good bugs and parasites and things are eaten, and weed seeds are brought up to the top to germinate. So particularly those tough weeds, things like docken, dandelions, things that you may not want in your veg garden are enabled, are brought to the light, brought to the water, and enabled to germinate. So generally speaking, we want to be sure that there is some sort of cover on your soil all the time. And that cover can be as simple as sowing a cover crop in winter, covering everything with a tarp, or just leaving your plants to sort of the roots, to sort of leave them there rather than pulling something up by the roots, so that that cover and that structure is maintained. Because the soil structure, as you probably know, is full of so many things. It's full of mycorrhizal, it's full of bacteria, it's full of root systems, it is full and it is structured, and that's what keeps all the goodness, the nutrients, the water in. I have a small person who's run fast. So keeping your soil covered is really paramount. All of the time, think about what you're going to cover your soil with. So the second principle of soil health is that you really want to think about that soil structure and how in nature it would have received its nutrients. So of course, most of the time you wouldn't have found something digging up ancient root systems, ancient mycorrhizal systems to feed. What would happen is that the composting materials, the feed, would be placed on top. So that is where things like mulches and other sort of layering of your no-dig beds comes in, because of course the soil is structured in a way that its worms, bacteria are used to coming up through the soil and bringing things down. That's maintaining that structure in the soil and allowing the nutrients to follow their natural path. So the benefits of feeding things in that way is that the various bacteria and other microbes in your soil are doing what they're supposed to do. This section along here has already been mulched. I wanted to show you. Look at all of that worm life. So we're really looking to maintain that natural structure all of the time. And that's really where the principle of no-dig comes in, because no matter which sort of philosophy you're following, what you're doing is you are maintaining that soil structure by keeping the soil covered with various layers of things, kind of depending on which method you're going to choose. And then you're also feeding it from the top, maintaining that soil structure and that natural flow of energy. And the biggest benefit of it is, of course, it's actually a lot easier, because what's happening is, instead of you spending all of your time, your whole life digging, which I have done many a time, is you are simply piling up layers of compost on top of your soil. And if you see weeds, if you see, things that you don't want, you just basically put more compost on top to keep them from the light. So you are controlling it in a lot easier sort of way. It's much more easy to maintain. There are some drawbacks to no dig. You do need a lot of compostable material. Obviously here at Garter, I have more poo, straw, hay than I know what to do with, so it works really well for me. In previous gardens, I have had to buy in things like compost or manure. So that has definitely been a drawback to that. Generally speaking, after a few years, you will hopefully be generating enough of these mulches on site so that you won't have to be buying them from somewhere else. You'll get an eye for, keeping all of your leaves that fall in winter, chopping up your sticks that fall, all of those things, sort of compost, all of that, so that you've got a nice closed system. But at first, it could be resource heavy. Generally speaking, though, I highly recommend no dig. One of the benefits of siting the garden where we have is it's between the house and the field, and so I have natural disposal units for any veg scraps, and the pigs like to sit sort of right here. For us here at Garter, we have an excess of manure. So this is our winter manure. We barn our animals. We house our animals over most of the winter, and that means that we generate quite a lot of muck and straw and waste hay. And so that's really what we use primarily for our vegetable beds. Now, ideally, we would have a system where this is actually turned over and made into compost here in the muck patch. Unfortunately, it's just Kevin and I, and just our strong arms to actually move everything. And so we have to adapt our method so that we're actually using quite raw muck and straw and hay in our veg beds. And it's maybe not as ideal as I would like it, but we just have to use what we've got, do the best with what we have. Yeah. This was stuff that was in the barn. So this was actually put on in January sometime to actually rot for a little bit longer than I would need to with this wetter mulch. But when it comes time to plant this bed, I can do one of two things. I can either scrape away the mulch and plant into the soil below, or I could put some compost on top, something like a growing compost, and plant into that. And just kind of depends what I'm growing, what I'll do. So for things like carrots, what I'll do is I'll rake this over, put some soil on top, and sow into that. Whereas things like squashes, I will dig these aside and plant straight into the ground. A lot of different teachers are going to tell you that their method of mulching is the best. And honestly, the best thing you can do is use what you've got that you can access cheaply and easily. So as we work on quite a large scale here in our garden, we tend to use a mix of approaches. So we build our outer bed frames that you can see here. We put down a layer of cardboard. We lay down a layer of manure, hopefully that has been rotted for 3-4 months. Sometimes not, sometimes it does come straight out of the barn if we know it's going to be sitting for that 3 or 4 months before we actually plant into it. And then we top it with a layer of compost. And what that means is that we're able to really fill the bulk of our bed with waste, with things that we already have that are free to us, and then just use that top layer for growing things in some good, more expensive compost, or maybe not more expensive that we've bought. It could be things that we've composted ourselves, but it's definitely more valuable because it takes more time, more work to get there. So, you know, really using the sort of bulking up our beds with things that take less resources and topping it off with things that take those more resources. So our no-dig beds are raised beds that have sides on them. Now, you don't need to put sides on your raised beds. A lot of people don't. A lot of people say that that's where slugs harbor. What I would say is that we don't have much soil between the sort of grass and a layer of rock. So we really need a lot of height for our beds to grow anything substantial. Also, I don't like the mess of lots of bedding and mulches kind of falling onto the sides, and it does take some time for your dig bed to gain some structure. So having some timber sides of some kind, it doesn't need to be anything fancy, just to give it a little bit of structure while those beds are developing, personally I think is a good thing. Not required, and definitely there's lots of no-dig folk who are not using wood, but we like to make things extra hard for ourselves.
Well, there's another reason. It's actually our chickens. They come and dig through our no-dig bed.
Yeah.
And actually, if you have sides, it means they don't scatter the
This is an excellent point. I did not think of that. So 1/6, just all that row to go.